Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be reviewing Horizon Zero Dawn. As you guys are no doubt aware, I received a copy from Playstation Portugal so that I could give it a look, tell you guys my opinions on it. And I did my usual gameplay first impressions video where I go over chunks of gameplay and tell you guys about the different activities that you can do in the game, even one of the main quests. And you guys can go check that out if you really want to see me commentate over gameplay and all that stuff. But today, we're going to be doing post-commentary. You guys will be seeing some gameplay footage in the background. Maybe not even directly related to what I'm talking about because it's going to be very free-form. But I will be actually doing a review, which is not something that I do a whole often. But since I finished the game this weekend and I liked it so much that I actually platinumed it and everything, I figured I might as well talk a little bit more about it now that I've actually experienced the full of the storyline. So let's get started, shall we? The first thing that most people want to usually know is about visuals and all that stuff, the graphics, all that cool stuff. So we're going to be starting with that. So in my opinion, Horizon Zero Dawn has got some of the best visuals and animations that I have seen on the PlayStation 4 so far, which is pretty impressive because the bar is set pretty high with games like Uncharted and so forth, and there's a ton of others more. It's just I've been working on this review, and the only thing I can really think about right now is Horizon. And not only it's got some really great visuals, whether you're in your regular PlayStation 4 or you're in your PlayStation 4 Pro, but if you're on the PlayStation 4 Pro, this game also supports 4K resolution, which again, I don't have the equipment to figure out if this is actual native 4K or if it's upscaled for some different resolution. What I can tell you is that I can definitely tell the difference, and it looks a lot sharper when it's playing in 4K mode than it does in full 1080p mode. If you really want to know the specifics, you guys probably want to check out Digital Foundry. They probably have all of the lowdown on what the actual resolution is, all of the frame rate. I don't have the equipment to measure all that stuff, so I'm not going to go around doing that. What I can tell you is that at 4K, game looks great, but more important than 4K, in my personal opinion, is the HDR. Just like the colors in this game, if you have a TV that supports HDR, it's just, you're in for a hell of a treat. And I'm assuming the regular PlayStation 4, because I don't actually have a PlayStation 4, a regular PlayStation on the office anymore. I just have the PS4 Pro. So I'm assuming the regular PS4 also supports HDR, which I believe that was confirmed that the original PS4 also supports HDR. So I'm assuming even on the regular PS4, you're going to get that sweet, sweet HDR, which is really, really good in this game. I can tell you, if you were able to just like turn it off and back on, you can definitely see the difference. Not that the game looks bad regularly without HDR, but it just looks so much better if you do have HDR. I think at some point a lot of people are going to start saying Rurikhan's just an HDR fanboy. Whenever a game supports HDR, he's just like all over it. And it's true. It's because like I didn't even have a decent TV for the longest of times, and when I started gaming in the current TV that I have, and with games that support HDR, just like these colors, they just look friggin' amazing. There's just a whole lot of detail on those graphics, and visually, it is a hell of an experience. All of you guys out there that just dig the crap out of visuals, which I mean, sure, I like visuals, but visuals are usually not what I tend to focus on that much when I'm playing a video game. I pay more attention to animations and the actual gameplay systems, but in here you have both. So you got really good looking visuals, you got really good animations, and there's not a whole lot really that I can complain about that. There is a little bit of a downside because I don't want to just like be super positive and all this other stuff and not talk about some of the downsides. One of the things that I would have to say when it comes to visuals is that I've noticed that some of the close-ups on cinematics or dialogues, sometimes, I mean, maybe not cinematics as much, but mostly some of the close-ups on dialogues, because every single line of dialogue is spoken in this game. So like if you're talking to a random ass character and it's got like a close-up thing, it's going to be fully voice acted. There were no shortcuts taken here, which is impressive. And some of those, sometimes you can tell that, you know, the lip sync wasn't really on point here. Or maybe the character expressions weren't really on point. There's a couple of those spread throughout the experience. Like, I don't want people to just think, oh, it's like super flawless in every way. No, there's a couple of things here and there that could use a couple of touch-ups, but they've never significantly diminished my experience with the game. As a matter of fact, whenever I happened to be noticing that, I was just like, oh, I guess this character is not the most important one, which is usually the case. The really important characters usually get a pretty decent lip sync, pretty decent expressions and all that stuff. So it looks good, and particularly if you're just going to beeline the main story, you're probably not even going to notice these things that I'm mentioning. And again, just remember, very, very minor, but I did want it to bring it up so that people just don't think that I'm just like, oh man, just a friggin' fanboy. No, I noticed a couple of these things, and I know that some people are going to call it out in the comments section, but again, they don't significantly impact your experience, and not only that, but the highs of the game significantly outweigh whatever these minor low points can be. So then, since we've gone through the visuals, I figured the next logical step would be to go through sounds and soundtrack. And the sounds in this game are very, very well done. Like just the sounds of the high-tech machines and the voice work I also thought was pretty good. But specifically the sounds of the machines, it just feels so nice. Like when they're revving up to do an attack, you can actually hear them go like, and then you can almost feel through the sound, feel when the blow is coming, which is very good for, anyone who uses their intuition with sound and whatnot to figure out what's going on around them, which not that many gamers do, to be honest. But, someone like me who's always like listening out and trying to figure out stuff, I could usually figure out, okay, there's an attack coming, it's going to come from here, so I can kind of dodge here. Even though I wasn't always able to properly dodge all of the attacks, of course, but it does a really good job of what's happening around your character and you figuring out what's happening in the world itself. And all the sounds are very well detailed, and I don't think I've ever been in a situation where it's like, this sounds kind of confusing. And the other good thing is the soundtrack. Now, I'm not going to say that the tracks were... how should I put this? Like, particularly the action tracks, I'm not going to say they were super memorable, but like the tracks where something important in the story took place, those you're going to remember, like the I really don't want to sing right now, but like those little accents is just very well done, and they work very well with the narrative of the game. And even the action bits, they're dynamic. So like whenever you suddenly enter combat and whatnot, the music changes. And whenever there's something happening, like the enemies are looking for you, the music still changes to something that kind of keeps up with the action. And it's very, very well crafted. It really makes the whole experience come together. And it's been a while since I've seen a game that paid that much attention to the soundtrack and being as dynamic as it is. And it's just a work of art as far as I'm concerned. So sounds and soundtrack, like, super awesome. I have no complaints there. I know that there's going to be some people, because there's always a group of people that'll be like, oh man, the voice acting, this and that and the other. And it's like, I want to say, I didn't notice anything terribly bad. And I've heard people talk about it. I've heard a couple of comments throughout social media and whatnot saying, oh man, the voice acting is terrible. And I was like, what the fuck are you people smoking right now? Are you crazy? No, it's not. Come on. Where are your standards? Like, the voice acting is fine. And they did a really good job on a lot of points in the story, in my opinion. And speaking of the story, I guess that's going to be the next bit that we're going to be tackling. So the story was the one bit that I couldn't really talk too much about on the first, on the gameplay impressions video that I did, because I hadn't finished the game back then. I had an idea, and I was very engaged with the story up until that point, but I couldn't really say whether or not it paid off in the end. And I'm not going to go into spoiler territory, so don't fear anything there. I have no intention of spoiling your experience through Horizon Zero Dawn. But I do want to tell you that the story is most definitely worth it, and it was one of the stories that kind of stayed with me. You know, a lot of games you kind of finish, and sometimes, you know, the story is like, whatever. This game you finish and the story is still like resonating with me. I'm just like, wow, that was just a really cool trip. However, there is also something that I feel is important to bring up, which is there is one plot point in the story that they don't tie up at the end. And I know that some people are going to be like, oh my God, no, because like some people, you know, most people really want their games to end and, you know, just actually get closure. And you do get closure on a lot of the things that were happening in the world. A lot of the stuff gets explained, what happened, how did the world become the way it is. All of that stuff gets explained, but there's this one event that I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's this one event that does not get tied up, and you get, it's basically, I think Jeff Gerstmann said it best. Jeff Gerstmann from Giant Bomb, when he said that at the end of the game, they kind of peel open the curtain and tell you, this is what we're going to do the sequel on. There is one of those things. But again, you are going to get, in my opinion at least, you do get satisfactory closure when you're done with the game. But at the same time, they also leave that little door open, which they will probably do a sequel because the game was just good enough that it warrants it. I believe this might even be a trilogy. I'm not sure if this has been officially announced or not, but if it is, it only makes me the more happy for it because, hell, more Horizon gameplay, I'm completely down for it. Now, one of the things about the story as well is that you will know, it kept me immersed the whole way. It's like I'm going through my notes here. Once again, remember, I'm new at this reviewing business. But it kept me immersed the whole way and engaged with the story, and some of the different characters I thought were very interesting. They were very well made, basically. A lot of the characters. There are other characters that you're kind of like, oh yeah, I saw this guy at the start, and it's like, whatever. But there are some characters that you're like, oh yeah, this guy's here, and it's really cool that he's here and supporting me in this portion of the game, you know? So that was cool, and I also felt that the protagonist of the game was particularly relatable, and I think that there's a lot to do with the opening of the game, because the game opens in a very specific way, which again I'm not going to spoil, but the opening of the game really establishes the protagonist and all of the actions that she takes throughout the game, as well as the tone that she sets into the story. All of that is a result of what happens at the start of the game. And I don't think there was ever a point that I was in Horizon Zero Dawn and I was thinking, why the hell is my character doing this? This doesn't make any sense. That never happened. Like, every single time I saw it took an action, I'm like, yep, she's doing this because of this thing, and this is why she feels this about this. And you always know what's going on there. And in making the character relatable, I want to talk about something else, which is specifically dialogue choices. So for those of you who haven't played the game yet, Horizon Zero Dawn has dialogue choices very much like the kind of stuff that you would see in Mass Effect, which usually in Mass Effect you would have the choice of Paragon or whatever the other one is, Renegade. Paragon or Renegade, it's like good or bad, etc., so on and so forth. And usually people kind of, oh, I'm going to do a Paragon playthrough, I'm going to do a Renegade playthrough, and that's what they usually go for. Now, when you're talking about Horizon Zero Dawn, whenever these things happen where you have to make one of these choices, there's no real good or bad. There's three choices that you can make. One of those choices is emotional, where she expresses compassion. The other choice is I don't want to call it the intelligence choice. I want to call it the choice where you think things out. So like the logical choice. Yeah, that's it. There's the logical choice, which is, as a person that is more balanced and figures stuff out, and this is what they would say. And then there is the angry choice, where she just kind of reacts to something in a very aggressive manner. And these pop out throughout the story, throughout some of the side quests. These pop out throughout your adventure in Horizon Zero Dawn. And I always figured that, near the end of the game or something, you would get this big revelation from all of the choices that you made throughout the game, and they all culminate in this one thing. Now, I'm not sure if that actually happens, but I have to say I didn't feel like anything that I made a decision on had a later consequence. And that got me to think. So I was like, okay, so why would they make you do those decisions? And I remembered, well, the dialogues in those sections are radically different depending on whatever you happen to choose. So what I understand of it is what they've done is you craft the story for yourself depending on your different choices, even though those choices may not have, again, I don't know if they have or not, because I only played through the game once. I'm not going to play through the game again just to figure out what the different choices do, because I don't think it's going to be that meaningful. But I only played through the game once, and I want to say that there were no consequences to whenever I did the angry reaction. There were no negative consequences, just that character acted a different way, and basically that made the character more relatable to me because I chose how I would personally answer to the things that were happening in the game. So it's, in a way, it's just a way. It's something that they do to give your character more relatability to yourself, because you're essentially deciding how she reacted to something, and the only end result is the expression of what the character did. And it was particularly satisfying on a lot of opportunities where I got into these situations, and then when the thing was over, I was like, oh, dude, you guys know me. I just want to like, oh, and then they actually give you the option. And I was like, fuck yeah, take that. It's just very satisfying, even though there isn't like a big payoff at the end. I think it's still very satisfying to see the character act out in a way that you would like the character act out in a cinematic or a cutscene or whatever. And I personally enjoyed it a lot. And ultimately, it's like, why did why did game designers at some point just all got together and said, okay, if the player chooses this, there needs to be like a consequence later on. Why is there this law of karma in a lot of games where you have dialogue choices that doesn't necessarily have to be there? In real life, just because you do something bad doesn't mean that you're going to get screwed over later down the line. I mean, maybe you will, but maybe you won't. You don't know. And this almost feels, when I got to the end of the game, I was like, that almost felt more realistic than a lot of games, because not all of the choices that I did necessarily proved the consequence, but the character still acted the way that I would like her to act. So I guess that's just kind of a win-win in a way. I guess I also would have liked to see a consequence almost, but not necessarily a consequence in the negative way. I would have just liked to see if there was, something that affected the character later on. But at the same time, I also don't mind that there wasn't, because I just got the character to act the way that I would like her to act. And I guess that was probably vague as hell, and you guys are like, what the hell is he even talking about? But those of you who've played Horizon Zero Dawn, you guys know. You know what I'm talking about. Now, like I said, the main story kept me engaged throughout. I thought the main story was really good. There was a lot of cool stuff that happens throughout the main story, and again, it's one of the better stories, for sure, when it comes to open-world games, because a lot of times open-world games tend to rely on their open world for a lot of things, and then they just have a story that happens to take place in there. Whereas in Horizon Zero Dawn, the story is front and center and throughout the whole experience, and it's really, really good. But just having the main story, just because the main story is that good, it doesn't mean that the side content was any worse. As a matter of fact, as I told you guys in the gameplay video that I did, like whenever I went into, whenever the open world opened up to me, I started doing a lot of the side activities because I was just having a lot of fun with exploring the progression of the character, exploring the different things that you could do in the world, because there are all these different activities that you can do, leveling up, facing off against different machines, and I didn't want it to wait until the story told me, hey, now you get to face off against this machine. I was more like, I want to face off against these machines as fast as I possibly can, so I took the side content route, and I have to say, it was actually pretty satisfying doing a lot of the activities in the world. And it's good because I never felt like the game was pigeonholing me into the story or pigeonholing me into specific activities. I was just like, hey, I kind of feel like going over here and doing this thing now. And I would go over there and do that thing now. And it was good. And the other good thing about the open world and all these side activities that you can do is that a lot of people instantly started comparing tall necks, which are those big hulking creatures that kind of work like towers in, Ubisoft games. A lot of people instantly started comparing, oh man, it's the Far Cry towers and all that other stuff. But I have to say that one of the things they do really well is that the content is not super repetitive. So even if you were to just beeline all of the tall necks, you would probably not get bored of it because there's not that many of them. It's more about the journey of getting to the tall neck and then climbing on top of it than necessarily like, oh man, I have to do these 20 tall necks or something ridiculous. There's not even close to that many, which is good because, you get to reveal the map early on and you get to know what's happening on each section of the world and just kind of decide what you want to do without, focusing yourself too much on repetition. Same thing with bandit camps. Bandit camps is something that's been done to death probably in open world games. And again, you don't feel like, oh, I gotta go do these 20 bandit camps. No, because there's not that many. And there's actually a very interesting character that is attached to bandit camps, which I actually missed out on a lot of the interactions with that character because I didn't see him. So if you're going to take on bandit camps, try to look for a character who's around there. He's got like a feathered cap, not feathered cap, but like he's got like a feathered helmet with red feathers and stuff. So if you find him, do his quest line. He's a lot of fun. Again, it's another one of those side activities, and it actually pays off because a lot of these side activities that you do throughout the world, depending on your level of enjoyment when you did them. But like personally, I enjoyed most of them because there are two types of activities that are like side missions. I mean, I guess there's more than two types. What I mean is like the ones that involve characters and whatnot. There are the errand type, which is usually your basic kind of fetch questy, kill a couple of things, whatnot, which those aren't particularly interesting. But then there's the actual side quests, and those usually have a legitimate payoff, and it feels good when you finish those. You get your skill points, you get rewarded, and you also get to understand more about the world and the characters that inhabit it. So those are cool, but they also pay off later down the line when it comes to the main story, because some of those characters will actually join you later down the line. Again, I'm being as vague as I possibly can in order not to spoil. They will actually join you later down the line. You're like, oh yeah, this character, I did this thing with them, and it's cool that now they're here, and they will tell you about their reasons why they're joining you on your campaign and all of that stuff. And it's very, very well done. Again, my personal opinion. So those errands and whatnot, I think I did all of them. I'm not sure if I did or not. There's no trophy for doing all the errands, so you don't have to feel forced to do them. But I did a lot of them, and the errands themselves, not particularly impressive, but the side quests, pretty cool, in my opinion. I already mentioned that the character progression felt very nice. However, I would very much like to see build variety. Like, you guys know that I'm a sucker for doing different builds, which is why I like games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, even Diablo 2 back in the day, because of all the variety that you have in which you can build your character. And, you know, it also gives the game a little bit more replayability when you have build variety. Unfortunately, in Horizon Zero Dawn, by the time you level up to max, if you even get there, because you don't have to reach max level in order to finish the storyline, particularly if you're playing on normal or anything lower than that. And by the time you get to the maximum level, you're going to have access to every single skill in the skill tree. And that, I was kind of like, man, I really wish there was more build variety. No, I wish that like you would reach the end and like, no, I played like this, so my character has strengths in these things, and it's weaker in these other aspects. But no, you get to the end and your character just has everything, and you can do whatever the hell you want. But the early levels in that way are actually cooler, because the early levels is how you kind of decide which abilities you're going to specialize on. So like your build variety thing comes more from the early levels than necessarily the later ones. So I had friends who would go deep into bow skill so that they could shoot 2 arrows at the same time and do all these other things, whereas I went deep into the stealth tree so that I could basically run up to machines and they would not detect me, even though I'm running like right behind them, because I just went deep into stealth. That allowed me to do a lot of really cool stuff early on, but later down the line, using just stealth isn't really going to work. But again, the character progression still felt good while you were, while you weren't maxed out, because I really felt like, okay, my build is really coming into its own now that I have these melee skills and these stealth skills, and it's working really well. But then the more I kind of leveled up later into the game, I was just like, well, I guess I can do everything I want now, which, you know, it's one of those personal things. I don't think that as an open world game, that's a huge problem, but it's just something that I would like to see a little bit different there. I would like there to be different builds and different ways to tackle different things, which there are at the start, but at the end, you can basically tackle anything however you want. The open world of Horizon Zero Dawn feels great because, like I said, basically when they opened up the whole world for me, I just started like going through the world and doing whatever the hell I felt like it, which is good, because a lot of open world games, they like to gate you through story missions, and sometimes you'll be like, oh man, I'm really enjoying this side thing that I'm doing, and the game's like, haha, if you want to do more, you got to go back to story, sucker. In Horizon Zero Dawn, that never happened. The game never told me like, hey, you can't go here until you proceed through this mission. The game never said that, and it is actually done in a way that you can do a lot of side quests before you finish the main storyline. As a matter of fact, I remember being level 48 or something and realizing, oh, my next main quest is like level 12. which I over-leveled the main quest, but at the end of the day, it's fine because I kind of feel like if you over-leveled that content, you kind of sought out your challenge elsewhere, which is what I did. I did things that were a lot more challenging than the main quest itself before I did the main quest. Hell, I took down a Thunderjaw before a lot of the main quest stuff, which I'm okay with. It's perfectly fine, and I like the fact that the open world is actually open and not gated. This is very, very good. The one complaint I have about the open world, though, is that I wish there was more freedom in climbing. So the climbing in Horizon Zero Dawn, whenever you want to climb up a hill or something, it's done very much like Uncharted. You'll be able to start identifying the little ledges that you can climb onto because there will either be yellow accents or white accents, just like, Uncharted and Last of Us, stuff like that. You'll be able to identify the things that you can climb and that you can't climb. Now, having said that, there are certain areas in the map that you can kind of Skyrim jump your way through, but it's not, when you go do that, it doesn't feel particularly right. Like the jumping animation doesn't seem like it matches up with what you should be doing, and you can advance through the world like that, but it's not particularly satisfying. So usually finding the ledges that take you to where you're supposed to go are usually the better experience, and it does limit exploration a little bit when it comes to that, which is something that I noticed very early on. I was like, oh man, I really wish that you could do like more organic climbing, but hey, it's not something that will significantly diminish your experience, but it is something that I wish was a little bit more polished in that regard. I wish because it's just one of those things. You see this game and you see this world and you just want to explore it in so many different ways. And whenever something gets to you and it's like, no, you can't go here, you're like, oh man, you get really bummed out, There are also a couple of invisible walls. If you get close to the edges of the map, you will get to places where the game's like, you can't come here. And you look at the map and you're like, well, I guess I can't go there because there's nothing to do further up ahead. But they don't necessarily build the map in a way where, oh, we're just going to put a fat mountain here because, you're not supposed to go here. What they do is they just have like a forest thing and they're just like, please don't go past here. Which in a way it makes more sense so that a lot of these games, when they put mountains around to kind of prevent you from going outside the map, you almost feel like you're inside a protective dome. Whereas Horizon Zero Dawn, you don't feel like that because you can actually look and you can see, no, this forest, it keeps going. I just can't go there because, there's nothing to do there, so the map's going to prevent me from doing it. So again, I think I only ran into those like maybe 5 times throughout my entire time with the game, which has been over 60 hours. So I don't particularly think those are a big problem. I would focus more on the climbing thing. That bothered me a little bit more. The high point of the game is definitely hunting down machines. That is what I had the most fun in. Always analyzing the different machines and figuring out different ways of taking them down, figuring out how to exploit their weaknesses. That was just so satisfying. Using the different weapons that you have. Like, you have so many different weapons in this game. Like, you might just think, okay, so you have a bow. No. You don't understand. I was running with 3 bows at the end, each of them for different purposes. Like, I would have a sniper bow that would have this arrow that does tear damage, that basically tears components off of machines. I would then have a special Lodge Warbow, which had elemental stuff, which would freeze machines or shock machines, or what was the other one? Corrupt machines, even, which you can. I've never actually used the corruption arrows all that much, but the description said if you hit a machine long enough, you can kind of corrupt it to attack all of the other machines around it, which was pretty cool. Again, it's another strategy that you can use that I didn't even use that one particularly. But yeah, and I'm just talking about the bow. It's like you have all these different bows. Then you also have the sling, which you can kind of throw things that look like grenades. I guess the thing that I could equate the sling more is a grenade launcher. And even the slings, I would have 2 types of slings, one for applying elemental debuffs and the other one for explosive damage. And then I would have the trip caster, which you can put down tripwires on the ground, which would explode or shock or put flames. And all of these different tools that you have available to you just give you so many different ways in which you can tackle the machines, and it just becomes very satisfying, figuring out how am I going to take this machine down this time. Because like you can take a machine down one time and you're like, okay, this is the easy way to take this machine down, and then you can try and take it out in a different way, and it's very rewarding using stuff like figuring out the different vials that the machines have attached to them, and then exploiting those vials, making them explode, making the machine be like, oh my god, what the hell is going on? Just like massive explosions of shocks and explosions of fire and ice. And there's just all of these different things that you can make happen to these machines that it just feels great. And the freedom in which you can engage each of the machines is awesome. And again, you can do so from just like a straight up, I'm going to fight you head on, or you can do so from a stealthy way like I would. Now there's also the overriding machine thing, which I was not a huge fan of the fact that you could override larger machines. Like, oh, you can override a Thunderjaw if you do a certain cauldron, which I don't think I've ever overridden a Thunderjaw, because I always thought that was like really cheap, because the Thunderjaw is just like this fucking really powerful machine. And if you override it, that thing is just going to destroy everything in its path. Because once you override machines, something else that happens is that your overridden version of that machine is stronger than the regular versions of the machine. So like, say you have 3 Watchers, right, which is the most basic machine ever. Actually, you can even have 4. You have, no, not 4. Yeah, 4. You can even have 4 Watchers. And you will override one of them, he will kill the other 3. And he will most likely not die in the process, which is just like your machines just become way more powerful than the regular versions of the machine. At least that was my experience. And I was never really a huge fan of overriding combat machines. Like overriding a mount machine, that's fine, because you need to get to where you're going and then you mount the machine and you go. But overriding the heavier combat machines, I always felt kind of cheap. But yeah, it is an option that you can do as well. And that was not something that I got too into. But yeah, you can do it if you like messing around with that stuff. You can totally override a Thunderjaw, and the Thunderjaw is probably going to destroy everything. But when you do override a machine, it's not going to follow you. It's going to path in the usual pathing that it will do. It's just going to attack whatever's hostile there instead of just pathing like it usually does. It is useful in certain situations, like if you're really having a tough time, but I've never found myself using override offensively unless I had a quest that specifically required it, which there is a quest later down in the game that will kind of require to override machines to do specific things, but it's actually a side quest. But yeah, there are a couple of side quests that require you to override machines, and I was not a big fan of doing that. It was kind of fun to see, but ultimately I also felt like this is so cheap. And that's the thing. The game felt easy. Maybe even too easy. And I played it in hard mode, and specifically, like, you guys are going to be like, hey, that was a very hard difficulty. You didn't play it like that because you didn't want. And it's like, the reason is also, guys, there's all these games that are coming out at the start of the year. I would love to have played Horizon Zero Dawn in very hard, and I would actually recommend anyone that wants to, play Horizon Zero Dawn for an extensive amount of time, play it on very hard. Because that is going to be the most satisfying experience you're going to get. Because it's actually going to be meaningful for you to like prepare the different traps and stuff to deal with machines. Because I kind of feel that on normal, I would say that you can take out most of the machines by just dropping 16 tripwires on the floor and exploding them. Just making the machine trigger the 16 tripwires, and it's going to just destroy itself. Because even in hard mode, I felt like there were a lot of machines that I would leave like 4 or 5 tripwires on the ground that would go through them, and it was like, holy crap, that's like health that machine, half of that machine's health. So I would try to avoid overdoing it on the tripwires unless I was fighting something that was ridiculously above my level, which is what I did on the first Thunderjaw. First Thunderjaw I took down, I was like, fuck yeah, you're going to eat these 16 tripwires and you're going to love them. The first time he hit the tripwires, there were parts flowing all over the place. It was really fun. But ultimately, that was another thing that felt a little bit cheap, so I kind of started toning it down. And yeah, it's like the game felt easy, particularly after you defeat a machine for the first time and you understand how it ticks and the attacks that it's going to use and how you can instantly disable some of those attacks. Yeah, it gets easy basically, and I almost wanted them to look, just keep introducing new machines, like just have this friggin' how do you say it? Just have procedurally generated machines and constantly generate new ones that I have to figure out new ways to kill them. That's what I wanted. I was like, when I first took down the Thunderjaw, I was like, that was awesome. And then at the same time, I was, oh man, I just killed one of the biggest machines in the game. I wonder how many other more machines I'm gonna actually have to figure out. And there were a couple of more, but it's like after you take down your first Thunderjaw, you've seen a good chunk of what the game has to offer when it comes to machine hunting. And I couldn't help but feel sad because I'm like, no, I just want more and bigger and more machines that I can hunt and figure out different strategies to bring them down. Like, I think I've taken down the Thunderjaw in like 10 different ways, which there are a lot of ways of taking down a Thunderjaw, and I was having so much fun with them that I would just explore all of the different ways that you could take him down on. And again, it was a lot of fun. But, after you've killed it a bunch of times, you're like, man, I just want to get that, you just want to get that feeling of how it was the first time again. And it's hard. It's hard to capture that. And then the other thing that I would have to bring up, which is also something that annoyed me a little bit, was the inventory management. I have to say that the inventory management felt dated even, because it's very much taken straight out of Far Cry. It's like you have to hunt wildlife for parts, and then those parts you put into, you craft and you expand the amount of inventory that you can carry. But ultimately the thing is, I don't want to hunt wildlife in Horizon Zero Dawn because it's not fun. It's not fun to hunt wildlife because it's basically you shoot them with an arrow and they're dead, or you run up to them and you melee them once and they're dead. There is no challenge in hunting wildlife, and so I never really, I was never really in a mood that I'd be like, oh man, I totally feel like going up to Horizon Zero Dawn and killing a bunch of wildlife, because it wasn't fun. Like, if you were to give me machine components to upgrade my satchels and stuff, that I could get behind, because I would actually have to, like, hey, you have to kill like 2 Thunderjaws if you want to upgrade like your friggin' the amount of arrows that you can shoot, or the amount of the amount of wires that you can get for your tripwire thing. Like, that'd be cool, because you would actually be killing stuff that is interesting to kill. But having it be like, no, you have to go kill like 5 boars and 10 foxes, and there's even one where it's like you got to kill raccoons, and it's like I've probably seen 5 raccoons in the 60 hours that I've played Horizon Zero Dawn. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, there's a lot of I'd be like super over leveled with really the most powerful weapons in the game, and then I would have like 15 of each ammunition for that specific weapon. And then you're like, well, it's the limit. You're like, there's no limit. I can craft in the middle of combat. What do you mean limit? It's just a hassle having to actually craft 5 more arrows because I ran out of arrows in the middle of the fight. It's not even hard. They've actually made it super easy for you to craft so that you don't even need to upgrade the bags. It's just a hassle because you're like, okay, I ran out of arrows. Now I'm going to press L1. The whole game's going to go into super slow motion. I'm going to pick the ammo type, press X, and I'm going to craft it, and boom, it's done. So it's like, the inventory management, I kind of feel like they could have done a better job there. And particularly because when it came to resources, it was particularly annoying because, like, I would have all of these things, and then they actually do a good job of telling you what they do, so that okay, these you can sell, these you can trade with merchants for things. But then I'm like, trade it for what? I don't know. Then I would go to a merchant, and then there's all these things that you can buy, and all these different things, like different outfits, different weapons. All of them would require different materials from specific monsters. So I would always have too much of that in my bags because I'm like, well, I don't want to sell it. I might need it later. And it got to the point where I would only ever have 15 free slots in my resources thing. So I would have to constantly go back and forth to merchants. It's like, oh, now I have to sell. Now I have to come back. And it's like, ugh. And I had maximum slots on resources, and it was always full. And I was like, this is just, again, the inventory management, it felt like a hassle, and it didn't even feel like there was that much of a reason for it to be there. I guess if you didn't have that much inventory management, what I mean is, I guess if you didn't have the limits, I could just stockpile stuff for crafting ammunition types and whatnot, and this is supposed to give you a little bit of a survival aspect to it. but I didn't like the way it was done at all when it came to inventory management. It was actually probably one of the most negative aspects of my experience, because there's nothing more frustrating than and I'm going to keep bringing up the Thunderjaw, and you guys are going to be like, why does he keep talking about Thunderjaws? It's because I don't want to spoil the other machines that you will fight after the Thunderjaw, because everybody knows the Thunderjaw at this point. It's the big one that they show in a lot of the gameplay footage out there. So you know what that is, and it's easy for you to relate to it. And I don't want to bring up other machines. But basically, there's nothing more frustrating than you taking down this huge Thunderjaw. And you're like, yeah, I took it down. Then you go to loot it, and you're like, no, you don't have enough backspace. And I was like, oh. That takes you back to that inventory management. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to go chuck 250 wood onto the ground because I have like 2,000 because I like picking up everything I find in the world. I actually had to actively locate wherever there was wood so that I wouldn't stop to pick it up. And, you know, it's a little bit frustrating. I wish inventory management was better. But other than that, it is a solid experience through and through. I would highly recommend anyone, even if you're just like slightly interested, even if you're just curious, you can probably buy Horizon Zero Dawn and you are not going to be disappointed. The game, there's something in there for everyone. Even if you're the most casual of gamers, you can just play on a lower difficulty and the game is still going to be satisfying because the story is really, really good. You can play it just for the story. You can play it for the machine hunting like I did, which was my favorite part of it. But it's just, in my opinion, one of the best games that we are going to see this year. And I guess that's my review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new so that you're always notified when there's a new video or whenever I'm live streaming. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.